Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasāmi. So this is Saturday night at Abhayagiri, and it's my first evening reflection since I've been back. I've been at Pacific Hermitage in Washington State for the Vasa, so was there about 4 months with Tanrakito and joining Ajahn Sudanto, the senior monk in residence there, and had a very nice Vasa up there, just the three of us and various and sundry visitors, mostly on weekends, for the meal offering. Kind of a subdued experience at the Hermitage because of COVID, different from the times that I've been there before, but nevertheless quite pleasant. During the time I was there, I didn't give any kind of formal reflections, just more casual conversations with people, so a bit out of practice with giving a dhamma reflection like this. And as many people know, I've come back as not being any longer the co-abbot, Ajahn Yanako, who's away for a week on a camping trip with much of the community. He's the abbot of the monastery now, with Lungpa Basano as the guiding elder, and myself as an undefined quantity, which I'm quite happy about. Trying to figure out how to be even more undefined. And I've been given the opportunity to go into a period of retreat now that I'm back here, without the formal responsibilities that I've had for many years. This is a very special opportunity that I feel very grateful for, having never really taken a very long period of sustained, we call it retreat. I'm not sure what it's going to be because it'll be for a year, hopefully, all going well. And since I've never done something like this for this length of time, I suspect that my needs will change over the course of a year. And I don't expect it to be a completely solitary retreat with no interaction, no talking, like that. I tend to be a bit more of an engaged kind of person, but yet still want to really see if I can scale back substantially and set my own pace a bit. Probably will join in with occasional Saturday nights and Wanpras, evenings for some dhamma input. But we'll have my meals separately and come and go quietly, hopefully, and just not engage in the same day-to-day activities that are the usual pattern of daily life at Abhayagiri. Have more time to study, practice, formal practice up in the forest, and see if it can work. So that's my plan, starting tomorrow morning actually, is to move into that mode and see what arises. Lupa has graciously offered to be a spiritual support and guide during this time. So since I share the day room with him now, I'll have the opportunity to check in periodically. So it's nice to kind of have a plan of no plan, see where it takes one. So even though the past 4 months up at the Hermitage generally were pretty sublime and quiet, it's hard not to reflect now that we're in mid-October on the year 2020. It's been a pretty impactful year. Hard to find a word to describe it, one word to describe it. And there's been just so much happening that seems like it. One major event, one difficulty, many disasters. Of course, COVID being the undercurrent for so much of it since the beginning of the year, and developing and spreading and contracting and spreading again. Just the whole, everybody knows the impact of that. The political scene, this being an election year, very contentious, lots of negativity out there in the political realm. All the different social occurrences, upheavals, the violence and the protests, and some of the protests peaceful. They don't get a whole lot of press. A lot of the violent aspects that have been happening get lots of attention in the press. And being close to Portland, as I was, people know Portland was one of the epicenters of lots of upheaval. So we felt that impact quite a bit. The natural disasters, the hurricanes in the southeast, and of course the ongoing, still happening forest fires on the west coast. We weren't immune from that up at the Hermitage either. Washington and Oregon had substantial fires this year that affected us, not actually physically, but the air quality, which is an ongoing thing here, and we're not out of fire season here, so that's another thing that's making the news, draws our attention. So it's quite the year, 2020. I don't know if we've been learning things from it or not. Some people maybe, some people not. They say hindsight is 2020. We're not quite through with it to completely look back at 2020 with 2020 vision yet, but hopefully we will learn things from it. But one of the things that is quite interesting, and it's actually, it is how it affects people and how we hold it, with all of this difficulty. The news has been relentless, and if you follow the news, it can be just one very negative thing after another. The news media is kind of designed to do that, and it attracts our attention, and it's designed to sell, so it's always much of the news is designed to catch our attention, and much of it in a negative way, and it's easy to fall into that. I think probably many people do fall into that, and it can be a trap, and just kind of a spiral down if one engages with it in that way. There's probably some of you have heard, maybe everybody's heard of the term that's come out in the past few months about how easy it is to get caught in that attending to the to the media, to the negative media, called doomscrolling. Has anybody here not heard of that word, doomscrolling? Okay, so people are aware of it. It's a great word when you think about it, because that's what's happening as you're sitting there with your phone or your computer, and the news feeds are coming through, and you're scrolling through, looking, and the mind is searching for the latest horrific news, the latest chaos, the latest, tragedy that's happening. And it can be just a pattern, of people who essentially wake up in the morning, the alarm goes off, they reach over, pick up their phone, and start doom scrolling. And there you go, setting up the mind for the day with all the potential, or imagined, or exaggerated sometimes disasters that are out there. You can find pretty much anything you want to reinforce those negative patterns, particularly this year. So people get caught in that a lot, whether it's one thing after another, and by the time you actually get going in the morning, your mind is already in a kind of a negative state from the get-go. And of course, there's all sorts of remedies for it now that people talk about. Going out into nature, making your favorite food, watching humorous things to lift your mood. Even they throw in a bit of meditation, that's useful, they say. That the best thing that I saw finally on one more recent article was this: basically, you always have the option to delete your social networks. Just turn them off. Same goes through, I think, with the news networks. Just don't put your attention there. And do what you need to do to stay minimally informed, but just don't follow that urge to doom scroll. So that's a whole thing out there, and very useful to reflect on where it is that we put our attention and how that has an effect on our mind. And you can see that it's not just external stuff too, but I think there's a whole process that many of us can be familiar with of kind of even without news or without the access to social media or news feeds. And many of us here in the monastery don't have that kind of access. But we can do our own form of internal doom scrolling, I think, where we start to review all the things that are wrong. If we have a tendency to have a critical mind, then it's so easy to get caught in that internal doom scrolling of what is the latest thing that I did wrong? Why can't I get this right? Why do I always make the same mistake? I'll never get over this particularly gnarly mental habit that causes me difficulty, causes suffering, kind of a hopeless case. Or externalizing it in a way of, oh no, I've got to face the day with that other person, that the person at work that kind of pushes your buttons, or even here in the monastery, the person you're having difficulties with, or you have negative feelings towards, or their bad habits, they're hopeless, they're not going to ever change, and I have to put up with it, I have to deal with it, whether it's, or family or friends, intense relationships that are even more intense because of being holed up during COVID, people having to stay together, that spend time together much more than they would if there wasn't this pandemic, and the kind of scrolling through the difficulties, reliving them, rehashing them over and over again. Or just the way the world works, in our own homes or our own living situations. or at the monastery, I was like, why does it have to be this way? Why can't we do it the way that I want to do it? So, internal doom scrolling, and the habitual way that can happen. And we go through that, and then maybe there's sometimes later on we look back and we think, when we're feeling pretty good or things are going right, or we recognize maybe through a little bit of insight and recollection that that's changed, that maybe it isn't quite so one way or the other, that it's not so definitive, this person or my own mind state, or where did that go? Where did that mind state go that I was so intensely involved with just a few hours ago? All of a sudden, that person that I was complaining about on my internally said something nice to me, and my whole view just completely flip-flopped. Where did that beast go to? He's now the best person in the world. So how our moods and how we attend to the world around us changes very quickly, depending on how we attend to it, how we see it. And the pain that we go through when we attend in the wrong way. So one of the Buddha's teachings that we're all pretty much familiar with, I think, is a line from one of the suttas, the two kinds of thought in the Majjhima Nikaya, where the Buddha says, what we frequently think about and ponder about, consider, becomes the nature of our mind. And that's pointing to this quality of attention, where we put our attention and what we chew on really affects the quality, the very nature of our mind, and conditions it, how we attend to things. Attention, manasikara. We often talk about the two forms of manasikara, attention. Yoniso manasikara, wise attention. Ayoniso manasikara, unwise attention. And attention is one of those, it's a mental factor. It's one of the 5 primary mental factors that the Buddha talks about if you're interested in Buddhist psychology. The 5 basic mental factors that operate in our normal cognitive process of contact, feeling, perception, intention, and attention. So I don't go through all of those to define, but attention is one of those primary mental factors. Attention, sort of that, it's a process, a mental process of reaching out to an object and focusing on it. That's what happens when attention is engaged. For whatever motivation or for whatever reason, for consciousness to arise in a certain sense base, a form of attention is in operation. And what then happens is that we focus on a particular object of the senses, oftentimes in the mental world, a memory or an idea, some sort of stimulation that comes into the mind, and our attention focuses on that, and then brings it back into the mind to manipulate and toss around and evaluate and further consider and get involved with. So attention is kind of a tool in the mind that reaches out takes hold and pulls it into consideration, pulls it into the realm of awareness and activity, active mental activity. And it can be either skillful or unskillful, depending on the underlying tendency in the mind that's in full operation. And we can retrain. We can train ourselves to be very aware of what that underlying tendency is that's governing where we put our attention, either wisely or unwisely. So the qualities of mind, of course, that cause unwise attention are various forms of greed, hatred, and delusion. If those are the operating principles, which it is for most of us most of the time, attraction, aversion, confusion, delusion, just not knowing, then those factors are what governs where we place our attention. And something pleasant arises, a pleasant experience. Desire leaps up and says, "Oh, let me look at that. Let me focus on that. Bring that into my realm of experience." And attention goes out and grabs that object and brings it in. Or if it's a unpleasant experience, something negative, painful, unpleasant and hurtful, then the mental underlying tendency of aversion springs into operation, goes out, and attention goes out to that object in a way to try and push it away, to try and get rid of it, to try and disassociate from it. Or it brings it in and starts a whole conceptual proliferation process that is in some attempt to try and deal with it through the thought process, trying to figure out how to deal with it, get rid of it, move away from it. But that's what's governing where and how we put our attention to what we go to. And the task is to turn that around, because we have this ability, because we're human beings and we have this capacity to reflect and to consider and to bring forth another mental quality or mental factor of mindfulness, to recall that, oh, I don't have to do this. This is a habit where greed, hatred, delusion is grabbing hold of my attention and steering me in a direction that's causing even more pain. And I remember from the teachings and my explorations that I don't need to do that. The quality of wisdom or discernment starts to arise. Wisdom, panya, doesn't always have to be something extremely high and refined and lofty, although it certainly can culminate in that. But just the remembering of how to look at our experience, that we don't have to let greed and hatred be ruling the roost. We can say, okay, let's see if there's a better way. Let's see if there's another way to attend to this that has a skillful result. And we bring up questions like, and to frequently reflect on things like, what when I do it will lead to my long-term welfare, or to the long-term welfare of others. What when I attend to it will lead to skillful way of understanding things. What's a skillful form of attending to this? If I do it under the influence of of confusion and delusion, then suffering is going to arise from that. If I see it clearly and employ some other positive mental traits, such as kindness or clarity, and see it in its true nature, just as a perception or a feeling, and don't move into automatic reaction, then I will be able to see it more clearly and get to know it, see it as a hindrance maybe. I can look at it in the form of a hindrance of sense desire or aversion or some of the more deluded mind states like agitation, anxiety, fear, doubt, drowsiness. Just kind of take a more objective dhamma way of focusing on it, seeing it through the lens of dhamma. This is panya, this is discernment at many different levels, starting to steer our attention where we put our attention and the way we do it in a wise way. So we always have that capacity to catch ourselves, to remember, oh, I don't need to do it. I don't need to attend unwisely and just create this continuous loop, because that's what happens. We have a perception or a feeling, a perception that comes with a feeling, a memory that starts with some sort of contact in the sense realm, one of the 6 sense bases. And that's the result of the past. That's a program. How we see the world, how we experience the world in any one moment of contact is part of a program of conditioning where we selectively see things based on the past. That's the perceptual process, and it always comes with a feeling of unpleasant or pleasant, neutral feeling. And we have to see that clearly so that when the next step in the cognitive process, the creation of a new momentum, of a new sankhara, a new volitional movement, whether it's saying something or acting on it or just having mental thoughts, proliferations, so that if we can see the perception and the feeling clearly and don't let our underlying tendencies of greed and hatred, confusion to take hold of it, then we can arrest that process of creating a new sankhara and infuse it with discernment to steer that new creation into a skillful way, rather than a proliferative way that just perpetuates that same pattern of cognition, that same pattern of perceiving, feeling things. So we have that ability to catch it at that point and create a skillful sankhara, a skillful momentum that brings us clarity and wisdom and stops that proliferative process. And then you can see the results of that as it reconditions that program and turns it into something that's, in the long run, a very, very sublime and much more beautiful kind of way of living in the world. So this is using wise attention, using our experience to inform us. How do we want to attend to this? We want to attend to it with clarity. Don't buy into the same old patterns. So this is taking doomscrolling and turning it around into some skillful form of scrolling through our mental world. We can do this in the outside world too. We can see how it is that our attendance to the outside situation, all the different things that are going on in the world, or how we attend to them, really colors our experience. And it doesn't mean we shut ourselves off and completely avoid. We don't have to turn our backs to either our outside experiences, the events of the world, nor the patterns and feelings that we experience inside. But we learn when to stop attending to them and how to stop attending to them unskillfully. That creates more suffering on top of it. We learn to just keep it just as an experience as it is, as a bit of information as it is, and not to let our underlying negative tendencies leap on it and proliferate on it, and turning it into something that's unbearable, whether it's inside or outside. You can even take this whole process a bit further as we kind of deepen our practice and are able to experience some more settled, peaceful mind states. It's the advantages of spending significant amounts of time, as much as we can, in formal practice, gladdening the mind through these wise attention, reflecting on things that soften the mind, soften the heart, kindness, compassion, settledness, simplicity, keeping our lives as free from clutter as possible, mental clutter, and reflecting on the goodness of the world, gratitude for all the disasters that are going around. We're still here, we still are with good people, we have access to good people here at the monastery, or people who are listening in live stream from their homes, even in these times of increased isolation, just to reflect on what there is that's happening out there that's good. Who's been kind today? Has somebody said something nice to me? Remembering that. If not today, yesterday, or sometime in this lifetime, reflecting who's been helpful to me, bringing up that sense of warmth, gratitude. Who have I helped? What have I done that's been skillful? And not succumbing to just the negative, self-critical things. What have I been able to contribute, even if it's just by following one precept today and not causing harm in some way? Reflecting on that, bringing that into the mind, letting it soften, settle. With that clarity that comes from that settledness, and we deepen that and expand on that and nurture that, and feed that. And the mind can become quite settled and peaceful as the basis for samadhi, for that stillness and that wholeness, that singularity of an open, broad sense of quiet well-being that doesn't dart around from object to object, from place to place. And that can start to see things in a more clear way. And as we settle with that soothing recollection to bring the mind to peacefulness, and let maybe the breathing, the body, attending to the bodily experience become the primary focus of our attention. This is a form of wise attention. This is a form of discernment, seeing the settledness and peacefulness that can come to the body and the mind through this kind of reflection, this kind of focused attention, but focused in a very broad, peaceful, easeful way, not in a tight, constricted, narrow way, then the mind starts to more clearly see when those patterns and those memories that used to grab us come up, and you can actually start to discern this wave of say a negative emotion in regards to a particular object. It starts to appear in the mind, and you can see the mind start to surge towards that, the attention start to move towards that with the basis of a bit of aversion or confusion or desire or whatever. But if the mind is clear and still enough, it catches itself quickly and watches that just as a process. And there's less movement into it. One doesn't grab it and proliferate and go with it. It just has this opportunity to arise and manifest, be felt in the body. The feeling is felt in the body, and it's not reacted to. It's not moved into. It's not believed in. It's just seen as an impulse, as a movement, an energetic flow. And then it passes away on its own accord. You didn't have to do anything. You didn't have to react to it. You didn't have to act against it in any way whatsoever. It's that clarity of seeing it in its true nature that accords it, it lets it run on its own course. And repetitively doing that, one sees that it's all of these underlying tendencies are just further programs, and one can reflect. You can reflect: is this me? Is this mine? And the more one focuses in that way, with that open questioning, you see that it's just a condition. It's just a condition. It's a habit that doesn't need to happen. You don't really have a control over how it manifests, but there's a modicum of control over how to respond or not respond to it. And in that sense, in that process, you see, I don't have any control over that arising. That's just arising because it's a old mental pattern. It's just when delusion is present, when clear seeing is not there, there's a certain solidity and belief in it, and one assigns a certain sense of me or mine or ownership over it. And when that clarity is present, when the open, relaxed, peaceful mind is present, it just sees it as a phenomenon that's independently arising, not in relation to any thing you do. There isn't any me who's in control of the arising, the passing, and even the recognition of it. All of these factors, all of these mental factors that are at play, arise and cease based on causes and conditions. And they're not self. They arise, they pass away, and it's all just happening based on causes and conditions that have no basis in any kind of self-concept. Ask the teaching, one of my favorite teachings that we chant, the Anatalakkhana Sutta, Anatalakkhana Sutta, points to that as so worthy of repeated reflection. Is this, this body, this mind, these feelings, these perceptions, these volitions, consciousness, they're not self. If they were self, then one would have control, and they wouldn't lead to affliction. We wouldn't let them lead to suffering. But since they are not self, they do cause us problems, just because they're naturally geared that way. And we're not able to have an ultimate control over how they manifest. They have a life of their own. And the Buddha frequently says, whatever bhikkhus, everybody, whatever it is that isn't yours, abandon it. What is it that isn't yours? The body, form, isn't yours. Abandon it. Feeling, perception, volitions, mental formations, consciousness. They are not yours. There is no owner to them. Abandon them. Let them go. Relinquish them. And just see them as processes arising and passing away. We can encourage the skillful ones that lead to more peacefulness, to clarity. And we can turn away from the habitual ways that lead us to get entangled with them. But ultimately we see them all as changing and not self. And in that framework, in that stance of the mind, a great peace arises. Even in the midst of unpleasant circumstances, a great peace arises. So we don't have to get caught in internal or external doom scrolling. We can use wise attention to gently retrain the mind, using mindfulness, clear comprehension, discernment, to redirect our attention into skillful attention, and start to live through the lens of Dhamma, start to experience the world more and more through that framework of Dhamma, which then leads to a real, true, settled peace, no matter what the conditions are in the world. So I think I'll just leave that for this evening's reflection.